Science is to monitor and to understand the changes that we are witnessing, and these changes are tremendous, especially when you look in the Arctic as well as in the Antarctic, but mostly in the Arctic. We have seen changes that have never occurred for probably several million years, so this is quite tremendous. The temperature there has risen by 3.5 degrees on an annual average since the mid-90s. So this is way, way, way beyond any targets that we have set on the Paris Agreement. It's about 9 times as fast as on a global scale. It has completely changed the atmospheric phenomena. There have been heavy rainfalls in midwinter. We are talking about a place 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. And having 100 millimeters of rain in the midwinter, this is so abnormal as anything can be in the weather in the Arctic. And this leads to, for example, to heavy icing. The whole landscape is put under ice when it's refreezing. But even this amount of precipitation, usually this is a desert, an Arctic desert, and then we get 100 liters of precipitation within few hours. It's happening so fast and so dramatically, no one would have imagined it would do so. For more than 30 years now, things developing as scientists have feared it would develop, without politicians and society in general doing something about it in practice. And the farther we come with the development, the more drastic the changes have to be. So now we are in a really emergency situation in order to avoid the worst. We will not avoid all the consequences, but now we really are in an emergency. What we need to do is to put upside down the whole economic system. We have to reduce the emissions drastically within the next 10 years. And that will affect heavily all energy production, consumption, ways of mobility, traveling, and we have to turn upside down our agricultural system, because agriculture probably is responsible for in the order of 30 to 40% of all emissions. And that is also, in my opinion, the only hope we have. If we turn this agricultural system upside down, we might be able to take a considerable part of our emissions back into the earth, into the soil, because it will not be sufficient only to reduce the emissions, because we are already at a level which is not sustainable and will have severe consequences. We also need to take something out of the atmosphere. And that is the only way to do this, as I see it, is reforestation and having an agriculture that removes carbon from the atmosphere, and not as it does now, that it puts a lot of CO2 and methane up into the atmosphere. The question is whether we are living in the planetary boundaries. No, definitely not. It's very difficult for people to realize, but almost 8 billion people cannot ever increase their consumption. It's mostly us in the Western world, but also in evolving economies. This globe has limited resources, and it's documented that we are now at a level that the resources we could use sustainably, they are used up usually in April. And the rest of the year we are using the substance, the savings, so to speak. And the savings are becoming less and less, and we see it with deterioration in natural systems and so on. No, we are not at all at a level that is sustainable, and we have to reduce this footprint that we are putting on the earth. Well, what should happen in Asia, as you are in the middle between the Arctic and the Antarctic, and you think you're as far away as you can come from these regions? Well, I think many people realize, not only scientists, realize now that you are not so remote from it. And we have a term that's called teleconnections. And that means the connections between very remote areas in the atmosphere. So what's happening in the Arctic will affect in the end, the climate all over the globe, also in equatorial regions and tropical regions. I think the Chinese have already understood it, and also India has understood it, and that's why they are present in Svalbard. They have their research stations there, because they know that these abnormalities we have in the Arctic, they are affecting their climate system, their weather patterns. And a lot of the abnormal events that have been in recent years, for example in China, can be directly linked to what's going on in the Arctic. The role of the science, well, it has been for many, many years to inform the public about what is going on. We might conclude that we have been not very successful in doing our job, but it's of course also an issue of having an auditorium that is listening and is willing to take a very uncomfortable finding. We can just continue to do our job and to say what we have found. We can ally with people who are willing to change, and for example now this very strong alliance between Fridays for Future movement and the Union of Concerned Scientists, that was really a hopeful sign for me. Things are changing. It's not just that we publish and write in books and journals about our findings and no one is bothering about it, but now we can ally with people who really want to do something about it, and that movement is getting and is gaining strength. I hope we make it in time. Well, solutions in developing countries, yes, I think the potential is huge there, because most people in developing countries are living in areas where there's a lot of sunlight and where lots of natural resources. And if there is one thing what these nations and people should do is to avoid the mistakes that we have made here in the developed world. And if I see most of Africa, Southern Asia, there is so much solar energy that could be used in a very sustainable way. And that is something that the Western countries, or at least some of them, have demonstrated. It's possible even under less favorable conditions to gain most of the energy from sustainable solutions. And if this would be applied on large scale in Africa or in Southern Asia, the energy issue would be solved. The other thing is that also many of these countries still have traditional agriculture, which is much more sustainable than our modern agrochemical business. And developing this into a large-scale sustainable agriculture would help tremendously. At the same time, saving what is left of the huge forests in tropical regions and combining a sustainable agriculture with the sustainable forestry, that would help tremendously, not only their own countries in terms of air quality, but also to solve the climate issue. Imagine you are driving down a steep hill and the road takes a bend at the bottom of the hill. And halfway down you notice your brakes are not working. So what do? Just go on? Or would you perhaps drive off the road in order to stop it before you're at full speed? And then there's someone sitting in your car and telling you, oh, you might get some scratches on the surface. Well, if that is more important than saving your life, and you maybe have a probability of 3% or so to survive when you crash down at the bottom of the hill, I think it's not worth taking care of that car and the scratches. And on the other hand, there is no other way but to continue. And I often quote Martin Luther, and if I knew that the world would end tomorrow, I would plant an apple tree today.